All
Recording
right,
in
call to order,
progress.
right at 6 on the dot. Thank you, everyone.
Mhm.
We have anyone from public? On?
I'm looking.
We have one attendee, and it's WinCam.
Okay. And there are no meeting minutes.
Correct, right.
Hey, we have one other attendee, Lauren Herman.
Okay, well, just raise your digital hand if you want to ask a question. Where we're going.
No hand.
All right. Okay, no meeting minutes, and get right into the concrete project update. Chris sent some paperwork earlier.
Sure. Let me sorry, make this go away. I'll turn my camera on real quick. All right, so as you all will recall, SGH, we authorized SGH with some district funding. Thank you, Dr. Hackett, to go in and do 2 mock-ups at the end of the school year. That was back in June. They power washed a couple of areas underneath the first floor slab. They used 2 different surface applied corrosion inhibitors. One was manufactured by Sika, one was manufactured by MCI. You guys may remember we needed to then give it 30 days for that product to penetrate the concrete. They came back in and did cores in those 2 areas. They used both products in both areas. They then pulled those cores and then did some lab testing. And what they were looking for was the depth of penetration of the corrosion inhibitor, and especially whether or not it's penetrating at or beyond what they've calculated to be the front of carbonation in the concrete that we're dealing with. So the first product, which was Sika, that was tested locally in SGH's labs. We learned from them about 2.5 weeks ago. It did not penetrate adequately. It was on the order of 1/2 inch or something. Details are in the report that I've shared. But the good news is the MCI product, which was sent to an out-of-state lab, actually came back with a greater penetration than what SGH was expecting. So that's really good news. The summary is that Jenny and her team feel like we have a viable product to stop or slow carbonation of the slab in the crawl space areas. So it's a 14, 15 page report. We weren't really planning on getting into the detail tonight, but we wanted to get it out to you guys. Number 1, to share that with you. Also, number 2, to let you know our tentative plan is for SGH to come. Jenny and Greg, who's the principal in charge. Our plan is to have them come at our meeting on September 9th. Even though we typically do lunch stuff at the first meeting, and we will. Timing is of the essence on this a little bit. We'd like committee members to review the report this week. If you have any questions, can you send them in writing, please, to Jay? We will forward any written questions to Jenny and her team Friday evening. And then she will actually come and make a presentation to us on the 9th and be in a position to address any of those questions. So it's good news that we have some favorable results on the surface applied corrosion inhibitor. I just want to remind the committee, from a construction cost point of view, it was between $600,000 to $650,000 for the SACI down below, and it was another 300, 320, something on that ballpark for the top side repair and remediation. Remember, the top side deterioration is not from carbonation, it's from chloride contamination. So that's going to require removal of floor, and in some cases partitions and door frames and so forth, and go back with new finish materials. So Meg and I with Jay have spent some time looking at those construction cost numbers. This is probably 2 months ago now. And we did add some escalation and some allowances. We reviewed them again with Jenny, and we kind of scaled that up to our in-house, our sort of inside ballpark number is about $1.2 million project cost. But that's still a very conceptual number. So given that we got favorable results, we've already given Jenny a heads up to think a little more about scope, what would be necessary for her team to get back out to the high school. I went to guidance this morning and looked around pretty carefully myself, got down on the floor looking for, undercuts under doors that have gone away from the floor swelling. Actually, there's some staff and guidance that even told me it feels funny when you walk in certain areas. These are the carpeted areas, so they're a little harder to see. So she's going to put a little more thought to that. She'll come prepared to talk about it on the 9th. I think as a committee, we should also talk about our disposition towards corrosion inhibitor applied everywhere, or does it need to go in certain high priority areas? And I'm sorry I'm taking so long, Jay, the other development, which I alluded to in the email this morning, is that every summer, we go through a capital planning, capital project prioritization process, hard to say fast, with the capital planning committee. Department heads throughout the town bring forward priorities. I'm pleased to share the capital planning committee has gone through 2 rounds of ranking, and they have identified that the high school concrete repair and remediation is the top project priority. And that's with that $1.2 million working number. So folks on capital have been eager to know if we were going to get favorable results for the product. They are aware now that we have. They would basically then be voting to make a recommendation to the town manager and town meeting for funding in the fall. I'm almost done. The warrant closes on September 23rd for fall town meeting. We discussed this at Capitol last week. This would typically be an article put forward by the Capital Planning Committee, but they typically put forward a list of things. Given the attention on this and the dollar value on this, there was some discussion with management about whether it might make sense for us to kind of pull it out as a separate article, and that it could be co-sponsored between both Capital Planning Committee and the EFPBC. So we're kicking that idea around. We have some time when we co-sponsor articles, we sort of have to write them jointly. We can talk more about this on September 9th, and Jay, I'll keep talking to Roger McPeak about this as well. Figure out if he wants to take the lead or if he wants us to do it. But by the September 23rd, we'll have to have an article submitted. No dollar values required, just a description of what the issue is and how it is that we want to spend the money. And then we have until maybe mid-October to narrow down the actual cost. It's the motion language. I know we went through this, last cycle with town meeting. It's the actual motion language that has to be specific about the dollar value, as well as the funding source. So anyway, that was a mouthful, but it's good that we got some favorable news, on the testing. So we'll just ask everybody to read the report. Let Jay know if you have any questions, and we would look forward to discussing this in some detail with Jenny on September 9th.
Any questions for Chris? Don't see any. Nope. Thank you, Chris. Moving on quickly, I guess. Next step, scope review of the report. You hit that.
I think Rich had a question.
Okay, go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, I was just my question, Jay, thanks, was about the chloride contamination areas. So the inhibitor that said designed for the CO2 contamination, is that doesn't, do they have an inhibitor basically for the chloride?
Yeah, so Rich, good question. So that report you guys got, it's obviously just focused on the carbonation problem below. Jenny and her team are very confident that they've got a plan of action on how to the selective demolition, and there actually is a product. I can't give you the name of it, the brand name of it, that they would use to treat the concrete. We did not have that information, and I don't. Meg can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe we had that information when we redid the hallway that goes down towards Guidance Rich, adjacent to the auditorium. I mean, it still looks fantastic today, where they tore up the VCT and they did, put in a concrete leveler. They put in carpet tile. It looks as good today as it did a year ago. DPW did a great job, but there actually is a treatment product that SGH is recommending that would kind of stop deterioration from chlorides, but that would be rolled into that kind of topside repair scope. And we'll ask Jenny to set aside some time to be able to talk about that with us as well. And Rich, I'm actually glad you asked that question, because the other thing I did just want to touch on is, although, we've talked about kind of wholesale right now about a $1.2 million project, the reality is the nature of the work down below in the crawl space is completely different than the scope up above. Very specialized contractors, the means and methods of construction, and so forth. We've already had some preliminary conversation with SGH about this, and they feel like it may be a sensible approach, even if we get it all funded at town meeting, if we're able to move forward kind of with a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 being the surface applied corrosion inhibitor, because that work could happen during the school year. And the sooner you bid it and buy it, then you're saving some money, because just the cost of escalation. SGH's work in terms of plans and specs is probably 3/4 or more done for that below grade, for that below slab work. But the top side, Rich, is going to require much more time for them to go out and field verify and actually prepare plans and elevations and so forth. So that work, and because it's topside, would actually have to be done in the summer of 25. So it sort of lends itself to doing it in 2 steps, but I'll ask Jenny to kind of be prepared to talk about that with us as well on the
Okay.
night.
Great. I'll have some more questions I'll submit to Jay then.
Yeah, just send anything in writing to Jay.
Thank you. Any other questions on that before we move on? Guess not. All right, Meg, the gymnasium project update. Good news.
Well, partial good news, right? So we went out to bid, and then we had a bid opening on August 6th. We had 6 bidders. Our low bidder had a bid that fell in under our appropriation amount, but they pulled out, and it's actually was not a bad thing, because it was Seaver Construction, and we've not had the best luck with them. So I'm not sad that they pulled out. But the second low bidder, JJ Cardosi, had a bid of $2.7 million for their base bid. And the 2 alternates total came in at $95,000. So that exceeds our appropriation. So I've had multiple conversations with Jay and Chris and Frank and Andrew, and then also Beth and Mark. And subsequently, Beth and Mark have been talking to the select board. The idea is that what we're thinking about right now, and it hasn't been finalized, is that we would keep the second low bidder, and I have reached out to them, as well as the filed sub-bid electrician, and they are willing to hold their bids until after fall town meeting. So the thought is that we would go to fall town meeting, request the additional monies, and then work with the low bidder on they would get awarded the contract in November. They'd get the gym maybe sometime in April. I don't know that that's been finalized yet, but basically they would have the summer to do the work, all fall and winter to get their materials ordered and shop drawings approved. So it'd be a much more reasonable schedule, and we will work with them on better access options that we didn't really work out satisfactorily prior to going out to bid previously. So has not been decided yet that we will go back to town meeting. We might, if the board doesn't agree to do that, then we're looking at changing the design, reducing the scope so that it falls within our budget, and then going back out to bid yet. But I have a feeling that we're going to end up going back to town meeting. So I'll know more probably by the end of the week. That's really it.
Okay. Questions for Meg?
What was the
Richard.
range of the bids that we received? Is there any point of sharing with us at this point? In other
sorry,
words, I'm driving towards the question, was anything obvious to identify why other than the lowest bidder, the other one came out higher. Anything pointing out, something you wrapped up, you may change the scope or something. So just trying to get a feel, what was the range of the bids we received at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I can share that. The range was, if we don't count the low bidder was 1.9 million, so they were very low. The second low was 2.7 million, ranging all the way up to 3.5 million. We had 6 bids. So there was a bit of a range there. This one falls kind of squarely in the middle. Next is 2.8, then 3.1, 3.4, 3.5. So the alternate prices all are generally the same.
Mhm.
But Jay had a conversation. He did contact the second low bidder, JJ Cardosi, and talk to them about why their number was what it was. So maybe Jay, you want to fill them in on that
Sure.
conversation?
I mean, he said that he didn't really carry much money for escalation or moving the process along with the schedule, just feeling that it wasn't going to make the schedule anyways, which not the right attitude. But restraints at getting in and equipment and that stuff probably added a little bit to the price. And I think that there's been a good deal of scope creep, you might call it. I think that's the word they're using right now from when we did the original estimate a year ago. So, I mean, line item for line item and tearing apart the original estimate, it really didn't take place for this occupied job that we have going on right now in the school and the access to the second floor and stuff like that. So, but he's confident that he could do it. And he spoke the right way. So I didn't have anything to say he couldn't anyways. Richard, you had a question?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, we
Yep.
to do our due diligence and do,
Right.
reference and everything. But right now we're just looking for a way forward, and then we'll move, as we normally would.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. My question's for Meg. Can you remind us the other sources of funding for this project? And I think there's some overlay money that was set
Yeah.
aside, some other.
Probably remembers more. Part of it's ARPA, part of the other I can't remember the exact breakdown of the town meeting appropriation, but overlay funds and then free cash, I believe.
It was $960,000 of overlay, 1.4 of ARPA, but 100,000 of that, Rich, went to wrapping up the construction documents. So around 1.3 went to construction. The balance was free cash.
Okay. And with all the spending rules on ARPA, we can wait until after town meeting finishes and
As long as we are under contract before the end of the calendar year, we're good. We don't
Okay.
have to spend those funds until 26, I believe, but we have to be under contract.
I guess there'll be about a month of time there from the time that the town meeting closes
Yeah,
until you have to be under contract. That's it. Okay,
yeah.
thanks.
Okay, Chris, another
I
question?
just wanted to offer too that there's a private sports group that has approached us, indicated an interest and willingness towards making a donation on the project, which is significant, although it doesn't close the gap. That's always welcome news. But I think they may just kind of be waiting to know the disposition of the select board on this. So I just need to follow up and have some conversations with the chair and vice chair of the select board, maybe put them in touch with these folks. There's also some interest possibly in a fundraising campaign to run between now and fall town meeting. The idea being that whatever you raise, if it takes something off the top, anybody can rise on floor of town meeting and make a motion to amend and reduce the number if it is to come from free cash or any other source. So, and I think there's some genuine enthusiasm about that, but I think folks just want to know that the board is still behind this project before they start putting their energy towards that. So some conversations to happen here in the next week or so.
Okay. Anyone else from Meg or Chris? All right. Moving on to the 10-year facility master plan update from Chris and Frank.
So I'll start this off, and Frank can add any thoughts he has too. You guys will remember town meeting. They gave us funding to update the 10-year facility master plan. We kind of went back and forth on this, and as well as with the school committee. In some cycles, our 10-year facilities master plan has included within it an updated enrollment demographic study. But you don't have to do it that way. You can actually pull the study out. You can do that first, and then you have that information to hand off to the architectural master planning team. And the consensus was we would like to do the latter, particularly the value that enrollment information has for the superintendent in terms of multi-year budget planning. And we also would be very pleased if we could work with the UMass Donahue team again that did that original work back in 2017. So it has taken a while to kind of have those conversations with them and kind of get them on board and some confirmation, but we actually did get it. The actual team that did that work in 17 said they're excited to work with Winchester again. Interestingly, they are starting a new project with the MSBA that looks at alternative enrollment projection methodologies. So that sounds very interesting. And they were willing to work with us because we don't have any irons in the fire with the MSBA right now, having, we last submitted Lynch in 2019. So we're excited about that. However, their plate is full. So we're going to start feeding them information on some of the housing developments and any late breaking news around zoning that you guys may be reading about in the local press. We'll be doing that in October. They will be working in earnest in November, and they think they'll have that report by the end of December is what they've told us. So our thinking now is we'll pivot towards getting the RFP pulled together for the architectural teams, have that advertised in September, hopefully have a master planning team on board early October. They can do their existing facility assessments, and in October, take a look at buildable sites. We will, just as we did last time, make a point of calling out the need to look carefully at Morocco, including buildable sites. So we're sort of envisioning that's going on in October and November. And then once that team is a little bit ways down the road, we'll hopefully be in a position to hand off the UMass Donahue report, the deliverable, in December. I want to remind everybody the window for statements of interest to the MSBA core replacement opens in January. I don't know the date, maybe Frank does, but it opens in January and it typically closes like at the end of March, maybe early April. So we've already committed, the school committee voted unanimously its intent to submit an SOI on a new Morocco in the next cycle. So that might be something that we're doing in February. It just kind of depends how long it takes the master planning team to kind of make progress. We don't need the master plan completed before we submit the SOI. When we first submitted in 2017, the master plan was actually not done. It was very far along. It was far along enough that it gave us some sort of ammunition for the case we were making to the MSBA. And then when it was completed, maybe 3 months later, we sent a final copy to them as a way to kind of stay on their radar. So that's kind of what we're thinking schedule-wise. And we just kind of wanted to give you that update. Frank, is anything you'd want to add to this?
No, I think no, that's well said, well covered. I think you got all of it.
No, Frank did engage UMass last year, and this I think was an issue that the FinCom brought to the attention of town meeting in their report in the spring. That was actually a different team. They were doing some much more kind of near-term enrollment work for Frank, looking at the coming fiscal year and the one after that. This is a different team and a different methodology that would be engaged on the master plan. They look at things like the top 3 or 4 employment sectors in Winchester. They look at what the trends are in those sectors in Middlesex County, Eastern Massachusetts. They look at all sorts of drivers in the economy. So super macro scale stuff. And in the meantime, we're hopeful we can get back with the team that did some work with Frank. If we need to update them with any, more current information and find a way to incorporate that in the master plan as well, we may do that, but that sort of remains to be seen. So we're making some progress. And that's it.
Okay,
That's the only
Good
other thing I would
questions.
add, Jay, if I could
Yes.
just add one kind of recent point of information. We're knocking right now already on the K-5 projection for Ripper Street alone. We've had about 17 students registered over the course of the summer, and we had another 8 to 10 who registered over the course of whenever it started. I would want to say March-ish. So that development's in full swing, and we're seeing the results of it.
Okay, thank you for the update. All right, payments, Meg, there was nothing. Oh, gotta go. Richard, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm full of questions tonight, sorry. What about the floodplain study for the Morocco culvert, Chris? How does that going to affect this process, the timing of this process for Morocco particularly?
Well, I was not expecting that question because there's more good news to report there, Richard Rohan. Capital Planning Committee in their second round has elevated the remapping, the FEMA remapping following Project 10. It's in the top 10 list, so it is virtually certain to go forward to town meeting. That's a huge deal. That's going to bring, I can't remember, Meg, I don't know if you remember, Meg, it's like at least 25, maybe 35 houses out of the 100-year floodplain. That's going to be a huge deal for those families, and it's going to make more of that site buildable. So we have I think we have some preliminary information about kind of where we think that might be, but that's not the same thing as an actual FEMA, remapping. So I think we would certainly let the architects know that that's in process. Meg's closer to the schedule for that project than anybody. But the expectation, I know certainly of the school committee, and I think the administration, is that project would be done and we would have a good handle on the consequences of that project being done to be able to analyze what we might do with Morocco where it sits today, because there would be some additional capacity, right, to build out. For those who aren't aware, when you drive down Bates Road towards Morocco, the corner of the school, the back right corner, and that little overhang is literally right at the 100-year floodplain. And since I've lived in Winchester, that area underneath the overhang is flooded with a couple of feet of water at least 3 or 4 times. I mean, we've had some 200- and 300-year floods. So that'll be huge when that project is done.
Okay, so the plan is to do those 2 studies in parallel.
Yeah, but in other words, we will not have a remap. We won't have a new FEMA map in time to complete the master plan. But we will absolutely do our level best to try to, I don't know what to say, predict, speculate. I mean, whatever we can do to kind of capture what that change is likely to look like, we will do, but only to the extent that, management is comfortable with it.
And you anticipate that's going to be another capital article for the fall?
Yeah, that will be coming to Meg. That's going to come fall town meeting or spring?
I would say it should come to fall, but that decision hasn't been made yet, but it will be in.
It's definitely going to be in the capital report, Richard. It's going to come.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work that VHB can do prior to Project 10 being complete. I mean, this is the last project, so they have a lot, they have stuff that they can be working on in the remapping prior to this being done. So I'd like to see it get started sooner, and then when Project 10 is complete and they can get out there and evaluate that, then everything else has been done. So
one of the challenges I will just add, though, Rich, is this is giving me a flashback to Winchester High School. One of the options we looked at was building a new high school on Skilling's Field. Some of you guys will remember that, but we hadn't yet put in the 4th culvert, and there was contaminated soils that had to be dealt with. We knew we were going to do that project, but it hadn't actually been funded yet. It wasn't underway, and there was like 2 areas the size of my living room table that were actually outside the 100-year floodplain. So the timing just didn't work out. We won't be able to get a building permit for a new Morocco on the site today that sits in the 100-year floodplain. I mean, the project will have to get done and we will need to remap. Meg, unless you disagree, I don't think we're going to get a building permit. So we need to have some
Well, I
confidence
don't
about
think
the timing.
timing, will work out, right, I
No.
mean, timing wise is an unknown, you
Yeah.
know, for the funding of this project, but I mean, you can build in the floodplain, you just need to, you know, do it according to acceptable, you know. It'd have to be elevated, et cetera, but you know, there are ways to do it. It's not cheap and it's not desirable, but you know, we shouldn't have to deal with that, but let's be honest, that's the 100-year floodplain, so we're seeing 1,000-year storms all the time, so and you can't design to that, so
Yeah.
so anyways, there'll be a lot of issues related to design and permitting. We're gonna want to make sure when the time comes, when you are designing the Morocco school, that you have a really good civil engineer and environmental scientist, you know, probably as part of the team, so they understand all of that very, very much.
I
Thanks.
didn't like the pronoun usage, Meg, when you talked about that just then, but sounded very depersonalized and third party, like you wouldn't be here
It
to be
is.
involved.
Very futuristic, yeah, that's right.
All right. Anything else on that subject? No. No payments, Meg? We already asked, none. All right. Next meeting, September 9th, which will be the Lynch, but we're also going to throw in some updates from STH. And then on the 23rd will be a high school and other issues. So not hearing anything else, if we can get a motion to adjourn, we'll get on our way.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Chris. Second.
Second,
All right. Frank?
Aye.
All right, Lisa?
Yes.
Brendan's not on. Todd?
Aye.
Geetha?
Yes.
John?
Aye.
Colleen's on. Chris, got it. Mark? Don?
Yes.
And Emily?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good night.
Have a great
Have a
Labor
good
Day.
one.
great, thanks.
Take
End of the summer, call.